Something that interested me was when you came back in 2002 for like 3.5 years. Whenever you guys went to Montreal, you would get booed every time, but you couldn't really do anything about it because you're a babyface, so you can't really, stick the middle finger to the fans at that point. But then when you're doing a feud with Hogan, which the guy who hates Hogan must have loved seeing that super kick, like you go to Montreal, and I mean, I still when I was watching, I thought when you did this because you're out there and you're like, if Bret Hart came out here, I'd say I screwed you once, I'll screw you again. And then Bret Hart's music hit. Everybody cried. Thinking he's actually going to come out, and it was a ruse. But was it was it kind of fun in a weird way that now you can kind of just play this up because you hadn't really had the chance to yet?
I had been to Montreal a couple other times, but never anything even slightly tilted towards the heel thing, and I don't think anything really other than like matches. I mean, not anything where I'm doing a promo and engaging the people or anything like that. So no, and look, one of the things about the Hogan storyline is that, it's like we want 97 Shawn, and I can remember going, you don't want 97 Shawn. They're like, no, we do. And I said, look, I said, I said, you have to understand. I said, given my past and my track record and everything else, I said, I turned it on. I said, everybody's going to think that it's, oh, I knew it. He's back. He's back doing that stuff again. I said, because it's just, that's what this wrestling business is. You know what I mean? It's a, and again, I mean it in a good way, but it's about, us feeding you what you want to believe, and most of us want to believe the worst in somebody. And so anyway, but it was clearly on board. We're going to do it, and going heel. Now I will say the one thing. It's funny. I was talking about that. I doing an interview about that. The one thing that I guess I could say was a little bit of the old Shawn was that when I went out there and I felt like, oh my God, I have so got him. I knew that I was one, not going to stay on script, and two, was not going to hit my time. You know what I mean? I was going way over, and of course I did, and everybody was okay with it because it's one of those times when that there isn't a person in the building and that doesn't know, like, oh my goodness, he's got him, and you got to ride that out. You got to take that out. But it's one of those. And I will say this: it's also one of the reasons that I never really wanted to, you know, whatever I guess to go heel too much or whatever, because I enjoy it too much, and I will. And again, at the very least, at least I know that about myself. I will take it too far. You know what I mean? Because it's because and I guess in our world, because it's not real. You know what I mean? And so, or at least when I'm out there in my mind, it isn't. You know what I mean? I could easily, and like it is, I can come right back and get, and be me again and be perfectly normal and, and say hello and be very loving and respectful to the guy I was just talking about out there. You know what I mean? I don't know how they'll take it. You know what I mean? But it's one of those things that it's so fun to do. And look, I am, I'm a, I'm a pretty darn decent good guy, but I'm a really good bad guy. Um, and that's because, but anybody will tell you. I think if you talk to any guy in this line of work, they'll always tell you like, oh, well, what was more fun? And they're always going to tell you their heel run or whatever, because I think creatively we've got so many other places to go. And again, I think in all of us, there's a, I don't know, I think there's a little bit of a in all of us. And again, pardon my language, you know what I mean? And I think we just keep them under wraps because we know it's the mature or adult thing to do or whatever. But, it's always so much easier. And it's one of those, I don't know. Again, I haven't seen it in such a long time. I've only seen bits and pieces of it. And I think to myself, like, oh my, and it is. I mean, when we play that music, and that's like, whew, when you set the hook like that, I mean, it is hard not to enjoy it.
Was there part of you that wished that there was a way that Brett could have came back and you guys could have kind of done? There could have been like a full circle thing had he not, been able to retire. That he could have came back and there was a way to do something.
For sure. No, look, if anybody were to make the argument that it's a shame they didn't capitalize on that, could we? Oh yeah. I mean, I don't see how we couldn't have. And look, I think it further proves our point by how many times the years after that we tried to do some type of version of the Montreal thing throughout the years. You know what I mean? Um, but it clearly never would have worked without the two guys. And again, that's one of the things that again was sort of troublesome with the Hogan thing was that he wanted to incorporate so much of that because he saw this promo. He's like, oh my god. He had no idea. He's like, I mean, I knew it was a big deal, but he didn't really know it was that because again, there's that thing. Everybody goes back to that promo, and you can feel like, oh my goodness, and it lets you know just how, at least in that area, how fresh that wound still was, and of course he wanted to, like, dude, we got to capitalize on that, and that was the only thing I was adamant about. Was like, no, because there's only, and again, this was even, Brett was still angry at me and not saying nice things about me, but it was still, there's only one guy that gets to walk down that aisle, smack me around, and put me in the sharpshooter and watch me scream like a baby, and that's Brett. If he's ever willing to do that, I'd have done it in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? But nobody else gets to do that. You know what I mean? That they don't get that payoff. That payoff is his. I mean, again, and that isn't me trying to be Mr. Whatever. I said that, everybody's asked me, and they asked me for years afterwards, same with Vince, if we could ever get him to do that, would you do this? And hell yes. Because, dang, I owed him that. You know what I mean? And I can promise you, after 2002, believe me, I knew that at the very least. I mean, I'm not, the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I knew that. And it was like, anytime you let him know he wants to walk down that aisle, smack me around, wrap me up. That's why I did it with Benoit. That's closest we could get to it in Vancouver. You know what I mean? There's like, we do the rematch there. Like, what do we want to do? I said, how about we have you tap out in the crossface? I said, we can. I said, but how about he puts me in a sharpshooter and I scream like a little girl, then tap out? Like, oh. You know what I mean? It's like, it's the closest thing we could get. Another Canadian dude, and he's from Vancouver.
But the timing of the Montreal thing when you came out and his music hit was interesting because in 2002 he had the stroke, and then him and Vince reconciled. And then I think it was just before that thing that you did that Brett had agreed to do a DVD for the company or something. He was kind of open to doing some stuff. And then there's a story that Brett has told before where when he did the Hall of Fame, that he didn't want you in the room for that. Yes. And I know that you've said before, like you were sorry about it. You've said it was the wrong for what it was, but you're not going to live your life kind of being like, right, to Brett. But how difficult was that for you? That you've moved on, you've tried to better yourself, you've done all this stuff, and this guy's just kind of like, I don't even want that guy in the room if I'm going to come and do this.
Yeah. Well, look, it just like, again, and that's one of the things that's very much helped, from all the years past, and certainly, certainly after we got to be able to talk and stuff like that, him understanding that, again, believe it or not, it's still, it wasn't fun being that guy. Again, I tell everybody, all the time, it's like, there was still, so I leave this stuff of being Shawn Michaels and this guy and that guy. I still go home and I'm Shawn Hickenbottom. All right. And then I have to sit there and look at Shawn Hickenbottom in the mirror and realize, all right, well, you are, in 1997, you were absolutely, again, pardon my language, you're the biggest dick in wrestling and everybody hates you. You know what I mean? And I'm going to say, and that isn't fun. And that isn't what, when you look back at the 12-year-old kid that wanted to be a pro wrestler, that wasn't your dream and your ambition. You know what I mean? And so it took him a lot of, time, I think, to sort of understand, not playing the victim thing, but to understand that, yeah, I did it and all that, but none of it was like, yeah, that's something, let's be that guy. You know what I mean? No, I don't think anybody wakes up hoping that, they're the guy that, I don't know. I hope I can be the next Ted Bundy. You know what I mean? I don't think that's, he's a mass serial killer in the States. For you guys, I don't know. I want to be Jack the Ripper. I don't know. But you know what I mean? And so, it's like I said, it wasn't fun. But anyway, point is, I know that, I reached that place. I knew how it made me feel, how much better it made me feel. You want it for him, but then people got to come by that. it was uncomfortable, and it was. Vince said, "Look, I said I won't sit in the front row where you guys normally put me. I'll move." I said, "But I'm going to the Hall of Fame." Say, because the Hall of Fame isn't about him; it's about everybody, about all those guys, that paved the way for all of us. I'm going to the freaking Hall of Fame. I'll sit over here. If I said if he scans across, he tries to find me, that's on him. And again, it wasn't. It was just. It was. And again, it's one of the things that, for what it's worth, in my life, in my real life, my anniversary, our wedding anniversary falls on around WrestleMania time every year, and I'm sorry, it's one of the things we do. We go to the Hall of Fame, and we're sorry, my wife and I are going to the Hall of Fame, and that's that. I'll move. I'll be respectful, but let's not get crazy. You know what I mean? And you may not have your green M&Ms in the locker room or whatever the stuff that is you might be demanding. No, and I'm kidding. He wasn't doing any of that, but again, it was and I did. I sat whatever. I sat by the big, it's just funny because my wife I took, wow, you really did get a crappy seat, because we're by the big swinging camera, the jib, so.
And then we started tonight, but you talked about the Undertaker matches, and you'd had matches with him in '97 and early '98, but I guess you couldn't have thought that your career would end with these two matches and this kind of classic story. Looking back now, how do you look back on it?
I try to say this. You guys are pretty subdued crowd, so I don't know if you're bored stiff or if I don't know, you appreciate whatever. But so if I get emotional, don't laugh at me. So I started at 19, painting this, unbeknownst to me, I got into the wrestling business, but this stuff is it's our art. And then as you go along through this stuff, you then begin to realize, gosh, I'm not, and I mean it again in a good way. I'm not like the other guys, I want to do this stuff in a different kind of way. And all of a sudden you realize that, you wake up one day, you go, okay, this is how I get all of these emotions and feelings that are inside of me. This is how I get them out through, this stuff that I do in the wrestling ring. And so for me, I'm painting this picture, and and it gets to the point to where I have that match with Rick, and it's and of course again prior to that, there's so many other matches where but then I think it all sort of starts with Rick, and I realize that oh my goodness, this is I don't know. I am now. It feels like I'm now wrestling the guy that was so important to me. And while I was out there, I got to uh, share with him. The 15-year-old boy in me got to show him everything that he meant to me and everything this job meant to me. And I got to show all these people watching it what it's meant to me to be able to do this, in front of you and and call it my job. Um, and after the first one with Undertaker, it just felt so, it was, I don't know. I sat back and I looked at this picture and I thought, I don't know. I mean, what more do I do to this? I mean, I'm looking at it and I don't know. What more do I do other than, you know, sign my name at the bottom? You know what I mean? I'm done. You know what I mean? I as far as, it's out. You know what I mean? And it is. That's why I get like this. You know what I mean? Because for whatever reason, I'm weird. You know, I mean, I admit it. This stuff was my way of expressing myself to you. It was of me living my life, sort of through the stuff that I did out there, and it seems, I don't know, I could be wrong, and if I am, don't tell me because it's my dream. It seemed like you took the journey along with me. I mean, I always look at it. I think to myself, and I do this stuff, and I see. I mean, there's a number of you that came by, dude, when I was 10 years old, and I'm looking at you now, and you got to be 30 something. You know what I mean? In other words, dude, when I was 8, this happened, and you're here now, and so to me, I go, oh my goodness, they've watched me, go from a boy into I don't know, an old man. I mean, and how does that? I mean, I don't know if it affects you, but it affects me. You know what I mean? Because I never thought when I was 15 in San Antonio, Texas, wanting to be a pro wrestler. I don't know. I just never. That's as far as it got. I wanted to be a pro wrestler. I didn't know that, 40 some odd years later, I would have these moments that, that were big to me, but were also, I don't know, cool things to you, or made you a fan, or impacted you, or made you think this, or I don't know, made you feel any kind of emotion. Enough of an emotion to come here and listen to me tell stories. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, well, thank you. But the thing is, you know, thank you. To not try to be too long-winded about it, which I guess is a little late now, but I sat back and I looked at it, and I did. It was beautiful. It was breathtaking. And you know what? I just figured it's like if I go out there as a heel for too long, I'll ruin it. Same thing with this. And this, my career, all of that, too special to me to ruin it. It was perfect. And I just thought, you know what? Try to be, nobody else does it. Try to walk away with some freaking dignity. You know what I mean?